Welcome to That's Inclusive, where we talk about disability and what it means to live a full life engaging in our communities. What does that look like, and how can we work together to make our world a more inclusive place?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our podcast, That's Inclusive, brought to you by the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. My name is Isadora Rodriguez Legendre, and I serve as the Executive Director at the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, also known as the DD Council. I'm really excited to be here today with a couple of staff from the organization known as ABLE New Hampshire. And I'm going to jump right in. We have some exciting conversation planned and have them introduce themselves, and then we'll hear a little bit from them.
I guess I'll kick it off.
Go ahead, Louis.
Cut right there.
Yeah.
So thank you, Isadora. We're really super excited to be here today, and all the work that you all are doing and we work towards together. My name is Louis Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, and if you all are not aware, ABLE New Hampshire stands for Advocates Building Lasting Equality in New Hampshire, and we advocate for the civil and human rights of children and adults with disabilities by promoting full inclusion, improving systems, connecting families, and inspiring communities and influencing public policy. So we're out there helping people and supporting legislative changes and advocacy work towards housing, disability services, education, transportation, oral health care, and everything in between. So thank you.
That's a lot.
There is a lot that we do. Yeah. And we're super proud of all the work that we're doing and all the partnerships that we have throughout the state. And, we're definitely covering a lot of bases, but, we wouldn't be where we are without our community and without our partnership. So thank you.
Yeah, and with us also today, Sarah. Sarah, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, y'all. My name is Sarah Georges. I am the community organizer for ABLE New Hampshire. I also serve on the school board in Manchester, Ward 3. I also work at Victory Women of Vision as the assistant youth director for the youth program. I also am a mentor. That's basically everything I basically do.
That's fantastic. That's also a lot on your plate, but I know that you're a strong advocate. And so a lot of what we do is partner with groups and organizations and individuals that are all about advocacy and inclusion. And so, our partnership with ABLE New Hampshire has been, since the beginning. We were part of getting the organization going. Before my time, certainly, but we're still happy to be able to collaborate and advocate together and really build community, because that's what this is all about. So we're going to talk a little bit today about disability and the intersection of disability and the BIPOC community. So for those that don't drink alphabet soup the same way that we do, BIPOC stands for Black and Indigenous People of Color. So we're going to be using that throughout this episode, and we can certainly add that acronym to the show notes so that people are aware. But I know that, Louis, you have worked in public education, and you have seen some things, right, in those systems. And tell us a little bit about some of the things you've seen and what you hope to share with people here today.
One of the things I really want to get out of, obviously my career, as Isadora alluded, I'm a former supportive education teacher in both emotional disability programs and intellectual disability programs. And I've also spent some time working at a private provider supporting adults with disability and community-based programming and vocational work. But this is something that, I'm very passionate about. When we look around our community throughout New Hampshire, one of the things we notice very clearly is that there's a huge population that our disability world doesn't necessarily always capture, which is BIPOC representation. And it is something that, I really feel that, for New Hampshire to be more equitable, we really have to start including BIPOC representation in our disability community.
Yeah.
And if jumping off of that point, if disability were purely biological, and we know sometimes often it's not, we wouldn't necessarily see racial discrepancies concentrated in very subjective categories. Like I'll give you an example. According to research, African American students are 3 times more likely to be labeled with an intellectual disability, and 2 times more likely to be labeled with an emotional disability, and 1.5 times more likely to be labeled with a learning disability. And what does that necessarily mean? These are all subjective. There's different assessments to kind of work towards that. And there's a lot of other factors that come into play when we're talking about diagnostic criteria. However, these statistics are not consistent with physical disabilities like blindness, deafness, and physical impairments, things that are less subjective. And that says to me that there is something going on, that there is an overrepresentation in these subjective fields compared to other disability categories. And what does that all mean? And I know we talk about especially inclusion, right? And one of the things that we're continuing to fight for is more inclusion for kids and adults with disabilities. But we do know that segregation is still out there. So just by that, we could kind of make the argument that segregation of BIPOC communities in the disability world is more likely than not. So we really got to understand that these labels that we have, do, I don't want to say harm, and let me repeat that real quick. Having this intellectual disability category, emotional disability category, solely on BIPOC representation. I'm having a hard time wording this right now, Isadora, but so I'm going to cut back.
Yeah, why don't I jump in and say,
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that there is potentially an overrepresentation of communities of color who are labeled as having intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is potentially harmful in that, as we know, labels follow you as you get older, as you go through the school system. I know that the DD Council did an information page about the school to prison pipeline, so that students of color, we know, are more likely to be expelled, excluded from the classroom, suspended for things like behavior or things that may be caused by a disability, which is totally antithetical to the idea of inclusion. Helps everybody in the classroom be more aware and more accommodating to different needs. And that, for me, I think that that's a life skill, right, that I learned later on as an adult, is that, everybody learns differently. Everybody expresses themselves differently. Behavior, a lot of time, is just misplaced communication. Like if you don't know what words to use, or you're having a difficult time and you get emotionally overloaded and frustrated. This used to happen to me in school, and and then all of a sudden there's like a behavior that people want to explain as like you're a bad kid or you're not paying attention or something like that, when we know it's that the system is not set up to provide the types of supports and accommodations that a student needs to learn best.
Can I also add that it's also a cultural thing as well? I work with a lot of kids. A lot of kids who I mentor are English second learners. If that makes sense.
English language learners.
That word right there. And over the years, what I realized, not just for like myself, but like a lot of things that like when we are starting to label these kids as like they're problematic, they're angry or whatever, or they have a learning disability, a lot of those things, especially from where immigrants come from, it's also just a cultural difference.
Sure.
Like, for example, I had a student who came to me very upset, and it was because the way that he answered the question to the teacher didn't thought the student was being completely disrespectful. So like here in America, we do like, you know, eye contact,
Right.
you know, like if you're gonna talk to an adult, speak to them straight in the face, like talk
Right.
to them in the eye, you know, give them your full focus. Well, if you're coming from a different country
Yeah.
where that is not the way that we
The
do things,
expectation,
yeah,
yeah.
like you looking to an adult completely in the, that's disrespectful where we
Right.
come from. That is not what we do. So we are also taking kids who are coming from a different culture, coming from a different background, and we're putting them in this American system without truly giving them the, I guess like the cliff notes, but not even just like giving them the tools to understand
Yeah.
American culture.
Well, and don't even let me get started on the trauma of changing everything
Yeah.
from what you know to like being in a new place where you don't necessarily speak the language, where a lot of times parents are depending on their kids to help with like translation and important like legal matters. It is a lot of expectation that is placed on these kiddos from other countries, and while they're trying to acclimate also. So it's really, you know, recognizing that also we need to use a trauma-informed lens when we approach how to support students to be the best learner that they can be.
Yeah, because like right after that, like my student, the way that like he came to me was like very upset. He got in trouble, he got suspended, and like you said, like once like you kind of label a kid, oh, like that's a kid who's a troublemaker, or you're labeling a kid who has behavioral issues, and not really knowing their full background or understanding where they completely come from, then you're just adding on to that child's trauma. You're just adding on to like how they develop in this world. And so why would they, if everyone in their face who they see every single day are telling them, well, you can't do this, or you're like this, or you can't this because you're doing this. And it kind of just makes them like, okay, well, whatever. Like, let me
what's
just
the point?
Yeah, like if you already
if you set me up for failure.
Like if you can see that I can't do better, then why should I even try?
Right.
Like, what's the point?
Right.
Because everyone else is going to be like that. So what is the point?
Yeah.
And that follows you all throughout your education too, and into adulthood. You know, what's the
point? Oh, especially into adulthood.
Yeah.
Oh, and what I have found, it gets worse. Like I love where I grew up. I love my friends that I grew up with. But the way I see them now as adults, the way I wish I could go back and like push those certain friends harder to be in school, push those certain friends. Okay, let's go to the Boys and Girls Club and let's go do homework club. Like let's do something better.
Yeah.
Because now as an adult, like it saddens to me to see like kids who I know personally, and we grew up together, and I see them in these crazy situations where they should never be in the first place. And I kind of wonder, well, if it's the system that really broke us, or is it just the world that broke us altogether?
And just jumping off from that too, that whole like, you know, linear progression, you know, white students are, you know, with learning disabilities are disproportionately enrolled in higher education compared to BIPOC representations. What does that say? You know, like the systems necessarily, like in a lot of ways, white students have the systems of accommodations, and they see the IEP and disability services as a gateway, but the gateway is not always the same for other students, right? And you know, there seems to be some sort of gap going on that it needs to be addressed. The systems aren't necessarily working for all students.
Yeah. So what's the answer?
Oh, that's a whole podcast, Isadora.
A whole separate.
What?
I mean, inclusion, right? Inclusion, essentially, again, I think that when I was growing up, there were very few kids with disabilities in my school. And there were segregated kind of classrooms for folks who needed more supports and services, whatever those might need to be. but rarely did we interact with students with disabilities. And so it wasn't like normalized, it wasn't typified in the way that I think kids today have a much greater chance of learning about each other's differences, about what being helpful is, what accommodations are, and that having an accommodation doesn't make you less intelligent, right? It just means that in order to learn something, you may need something different than the student A, right? And I think that is something that gets convoluted when I hear, for example, folks talking about bills in the legislature to create segregated schools for students with disabilities. Like that's an example of like the extreme, opposite of what we're trying to do, because that creates more issues than having kids in the classroom. And I know it's difficult for teachers, and I know that it can be challenging with staffing shortages and having, one-on-one paras that are well-trained and supported to be able to make sure that kids have what they need. But in the end, I think it just makes better humans, because we're creating a sense of like, these are the people in my community. And now I'm gonna be more compassionate, I'm gonna be more resourceful in how I approach people, how I communicate with people, how I support people in my community, being a good neighbor, right?
Yeah.
It's like learning to be a good neighbor. And I think that those are skills that like we lose sight of when we talk about like taking kids with supportive education needs out of the classroom.
No, so true. I have a nephew who's my godson, my best friend in the whole entire world. His name is Jordan, and he is autistic. I say that he's nonverbal, but I always say that he's the bossiest nonverbal person I've ever met in my life, because he's not like the type of kid who is just gonna be like not there. Like he's present.
Yeah.
He's gonna be in your face. He's gonna say hello to you. If he likes you, he's gonna follow you around. He's gonna want to help you. And if you want something, like he's going to like literally grab your hand, bring you into the kitchen or bring you into the living room, and he's gonna make you touch whatever he wants, and then he's gonna like ask for it. So I love how he is. I think he's just like the best person in the whole entire world. But I commend his little brother so much, because he is this little boy who, I want to say he's like in first grade, and he obviously he knows how to be within like the family.
Mm-hmm.
So like he knows how, even at a young age, like he knows how to help his brother, he knows how to assist his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Like he knows how to be like, Jordan, don't do this, Jordan, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go over here, let's play. Like they're really interacting with each other, and it's amazing. I love it. But when they switched schools and they moved into a different town, my nephew EJ, he had like made friends in the classroom, loved it. But then there was one little boy that was in the class that like no one really talked to, and it made him so enraged. Like this boy would come home and tell my sister like, it's not nice, why don't people play with him, he's super cool. And that became like his best friend.
Yeah.
And when we finally got to meet the child, like we realized that like we didn't know, like the parents obviously didn't know each other at that moment, but when they finally got to meet, like my sister realized, oh, like his best friend is autistic. But like it didn't click to him, because to him it was like it's completely normal. Like he's been around kids who have disabilities, he's been around kids who don't have disabilities, and for him he was just like, oh well, that's my friend, because no one can pick on him, and no one can be nice to him, because they have to go through me. And I'm like, well, that's a little version of me. That's my little mini me, But like just the way I see him interact with other children, whether they have a disability or not, I'm just like, wow, that is like, I wish everyone could be like my nephew EJ, because like he takes it on as a small kid. Like he understands, yes, he may have a disability, that doesn't mean he can't play with me.
Right.
Like, that doesn't mean we can't do things together. That doesn't mean we can't have adventures. And it's amazing. But when I remember as they're growing, my other sister had 3 kids and they don't have any disabilities, and they weren't around kids who have disabilities, especially in their classrooms.
Mhm.
So when they come over and like they're all together, they had 1,000,010 questions when it comes to Jordan. Like, why doesn't he do this?
Mhm.
Why does Jordan act like that?
Mhm.
And a little part of me kind of felt like embarrassed,
Mhm.
because I'm just like, oh wow, like they have such a disadvantage when it comes to the actual world. Like, they're
Mhm.
going to be around people who have disabilities, and they
Mhm.
not to like they don't know how to act, but like they don't know too much, so they don't really know how to act.
Right, they haven't been exposed
Yeah.
to situations where they have to be more creative
Yeah.
or understanding about what someone's needs might not be, or how someone's needs might be different than other people.
Yeah. And so like now that they've like obviously they're cousins, so they grow up together, they know each other. But like now it's a different shift. Like
Mhm.
they are so like they're out constantly asking for where Jordan is. If they don't hear Jordan like marching around the house, or they don't hear Jordan like downstairs laughing or giggling, like one of them are taking it amongst themselves to like, oh, where's Jordan?
Mhm.
Like we gotta go find Jordan. Jordan, are you there? And then as soon as they pop up, okay, he's fine.
Mhm.
Like, and I'm amazed at these children. I never had that type of experience when I was growing up. I knew one person who had a disability growing up, and that was a kid at my church.
Mhm.
And his family was our friend, so like that was the only kid I knew.
Mhm.
And like even having my own disability, I have dyslexia, like there was no one really to like, I guess, like nurture that part of it, or like make me understand, or even help my friends understand like what is it that when it comes to a disability, how we are supposed to be, how we're supposed to, I don't want to say act, but like how we're supposed to be welcoming and open and just understand each other.
One thing I just wanted to ask Sarah, I think, bringing it back to the intersectionality piece, right? I think especially when people that have high functional support needs as adults, that are struggling out in the community, they might have vocalizations, or they might, be expressing anger and frustrations in a different way. And I think, when you throw in somebody that also might be part of the BIPOC community, that kind of adds a little bit more pressure to behave and not get other people involved just because of just preconceived notions of what that means. So as you're like, supporting your nephew and talking to your sister, is that a concern that you all might fear for your nephew as he gets older?
Oh, 100%. I try not to think about it too much, because if I do, I start crying. When I see things like that during the summer about like that young autistic boy who literally like the police shot him like right behind the fence, like I break down every single time thinking about it. And when I can really talk about like my community. So I'm Congolese and Haitian, and so being Congolese and Haitian, we don't have a word for someone who has a disability. We don't have a word in Lingala, and if we do have a word in Lingala, it's a racial word, so we can't like it's not appropriate to say. But they use it, but they also because they just don't know.
Right.
So growing up, especially in our Congolese community, anyone who has a disability back home is shunned away. You're hidden. I can openly say that, like here in Manchester, like here in New Hampshire, like in Manchester, where I'm from, I know one kid who has a disability besides my nephew. And he is blind, and he only comes out into the community because he plays piano. he only comes out to the community when like the church is doing something,
Mhm.
but besides that, we never see him.
Mm.
I know another young man, super sweet, super tall, but he's deaf and he's in part of the Sudanese community.
Mhm.
I only see him when his cousins take him out, and that's
Mm.
rarely. Um, so like even here, we still have that same mentality that we have back home.
Mhm.
Because honestly, when it comes to our history, when it comes to stuff like when it comes to these issues, it's a shameful thing. Like they put it like in our heads that if you have a child who has a disability, one, it's the mother's fault. Like you did something during your pregnancy to create your child to be like this, or you are cursed, or someone voodooed you, and because of that, that is your shame, that is your cross to carry, and because it is your cross to carry, this is your consequence.
Yeah.
So you have shame upon the mother, you have shame upon the child because the child doesn't really know if like this is normal to them. So like it's that
Well,
living shame.
And I bet that that is amplified when you're in a community that's primarily white, primarily, has a different cultural
Oh, yeah.
norms, cultural expectations than your family. There has to be a lot of fear about being out in the community and like what potentially could happen, right?
Mhm.
If there's some issue or police involvement. It's not like every officer is trained to understand what the needs of people with disabilities are in terms of highly, emotional and dangerous situations. There's just this kind of level of like unknown what the consequences could be. So yeah, I mean, why not keep your kid home? Risk of them being shot for not being able to communicate that they are having a crisis or a meltdown because of XYZ and that they're not a threat, right? If the assumption is that there's this person is behaving differently and there potentially could be a threat, like there's just a danger associated with that.
Of course. But then like at the same time, now that child is not getting the resources that they
Right.
probably need.
Exactly.
Like I remember I got diagnosed with dyslexia in third grade, like most kids who do. And I remember not knowing about what an IEP was until maybe I was in sixth grade, because I just knew that there was like a packet that came home every single day that like every report card or progress report I had to give to my parents. They just had to sign it, and that was it. Like I never actually saw my mom read it. She just said, "What was this?" I'm like, "It's my IEP," and that was it. And she just signed it. But then like there's that aspect of us just like culturally not knowing those resources and understanding what those resources can help and how they can help our kid. There's that part. There is a lack of understanding that because even though your child has a disability does not mean that you as a parent or even as your child, like you're not worthy. You shouldn't be shameful. There is that aspect as well. But then as like the child is growing, like what's going to happen to that child? Like our parents are not going to live forever. So what is going to be the next steps for that child? Where are they going to go? There's no real understanding. Like in our community, we have a lot of people who are healthcare workers. So it is okay for us to be a home care. It is okay for us to take care of people who have disabilities. But when it comes to our own, that is where we have a miscommunication. That's when we have a lack of understanding.
A disconnect.
Yeah, like it's great that you could take care of somebody else, but what about the ones who are in our community? Like who's going to take care of them when you're gone?
Right.
Like who is it that you're going to be able to trust?
Yeah. And then getting back to Lewis's like early statistics, we know that the earlier kids are exposed to supports and services, right? We have something called ESS, early supports and services, that is really for the 0 to 3 population, that we know the younger people start receiving supports, the better the outcomes are.
Mm.
And the more acclimated they become to society and community settings. And there's all sorts of therapies and communication strategies that can be explored. But if you are not connected to that, then you're a real disadvantage. And the older you get, the harder it is to kind of start to implement something new. What were you going to say, Louis?
And this is one of the things that we want to work on at ABLE. And this is what, so if you're out there and you're something that you're passionate about, contact Sarah Georges at ablenh.org. But, this is something that I think is a huge need within New Hampshire and all in this community is education on disability. It is a group that we oftentimes forget about. And
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
if we're thinking long term, starting when kids are younger, like you mentioned, and
Yeah.
it has to start with educating families and then
Yes.
kind of move towards educating the, and supporting the child. And that child's going to eventually be an adult in the disability system. And the more supports we do at an earlier age, the more, independence they're going to have at a later age. And,
Yeah.
we do need to start kind of having this conversation. It is something that Sarah and I know we've had conversations with others that we're really excited to start kicking off in the next several months, because it's I don't know, I think it's a passion project, but also it's an important project. Like this needs to happen.
Yeah, 100%. Well, this has been a really amazing conversation. I want to thank you both for coming on the show and just ask if there are any additional takeaways that you want our listeners to really have, either related to ABLE or related to inclusive education, anything at all.
I'll let Louis go first if he wants to.
I think, the takeaway I want people to get is that, inclusion has to happen in all communities for things to be fully inclusive. And, and just because, we're not doing it now doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. So
Right.
it's something that we need to look at and start having tough conversations about.
Yeah. Anything for you, Sarah?
I would just honestly say, but mostly to my BIPOC community, understand that a disability is not a weakness. It is 100% a strength, and it's a 100% your child's superpower and your superpower. Know that you are perfect and know that there are resources. Please research, please come to ABLE-NH if you have any questions, because we're not going to turn you away, and we will answer any questions you may have or help you find whatever resource that you may need. So please just know that you are amazing. To the parents, I know it's a struggle, but you are doing a fantastic job. Just keep on holding on out there.
Thank you so much for that message. Go ahead.
I just wanted to thank, Isadora and our friends over at the DD Council for having this conversation. And, I think, we need to be having this conversation in more spaces.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I definitely think it's important that families be connected to resources. We'll put a bunch of resources in the show notes for you all, including resources related to ABLE-NH so that you can learn more and potentially get involved. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vanessa Blaze, and this was a production of the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, produced by Isadora Rodriguez-Legendre and Vanessa Blaze, with many thanks to Josh Hardy and the rest of the crew here at Concord TV. We love to have guests with differing perspectives. These views are personal and do not necessarily represent those of the DD Council.